The warning sirens screamed across Earth's last military base. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the command center, watching red dots fill the holographic display. Each dot represented an enemy ship. There were thousands of them. "How many do we have left?" Jake asked his aide, Lieutenant Carroll Webb. 293 ships, sir. Maybe 20 more if we count the damaged ones. Jake nodded slowly. The math was simple and terrible. The Zenith Collective had 10,000 ships. Heading toward Earth, humanity had less than 300. It would be a massacre. Captain Lessa Hayes climbed out of her fighter jet, pulling off her helmet. Her blonde hair was soaked with sweat. She had just returned from a patrol near what used to be Luna Station. Now it was just floating metal and dead bodies. "Any sign of survivors?" asked Lieutenant Tony Griffin, her wingman. "None. They're all gone." Lisa's voice was flat. She had stopped feeling sad about death weeks ago. There had been too much of it. Tony kicked at a piece of debris. "My ammo counter says I've got maybe 6 shots left. What about you?" 4. Lisa looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the biggest alien fleet in history was coming to finish what they started. "Think we'll see tomorrow?" "Probably not." In the underground research labs of New Geneva, Dr. Helen Parker was having an argument with her boss. General Chris Coleman stood with his arms crossed, shaking his head. "You want me to authorize what exactly?" Chris said. "The activation protocol. We've found patterns in the old stories, myths from every culture on Earth. They all say the same things. Gods walking among people, heroes with impossible strength, magic weapons that could destroy armies. Those are just stories, Helen. What if they're not?" Helen's assistant, Dr. Alex Kumar, stepped forward. "We've been studying the ancient sites for years. Stonehenge, the pyramids, Machu Picchu. They all have the same energy readings when we play certain sound frequencies." Chris laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You want me to bet humanity's survival on fairy tales?" "We're going to lose anyway," Helen said quietly. "The Zenith Collective has better ships, better weapons, more soldiers. We have nothing left to lose." The general stared at the reports on his desk. Intelligence said the alien fleet would arrive in 6 hours. Earth's defenses would last maybe 30 minutes against that kind of firepower. "Fine," Chris said finally. "Do whatever you want. It can't make things worse." Helen and Alex ran to their equipment. They had spent months preparing for this moment, even though they weren't sure it would work. Ancient texts from around the world contained the same mathematical sequences. When converted to sound waves, these sequences made the old monuments vibrate in strange ways. "Starting the transmission," Alex said, flipping switches on the control panel. Around the world, massive speakers that had been secretly installed near ancient sites began to play. The sound was too low for human ears to hear, but instruments detected it immediately. At Stonehenge, the giant stones began to glow with a faint blue light. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid's surface shimmered like water. In Peru, the ruins of Machu Picchu hummed with energy. Nothing else happened. "Did it work?" Helen asked. "I don't know. The readings are off the charts, but I don't see any obvious changes." High above Earth, Captain Lisa Hayes was leading her squadron. On another patrol, the enemy scouts had been spotted near Mars, which meant the main fleet wasn't far behind. Her radio crackled with reports from other pilots. "This is Bravo Squadron. We've got visual on enemy ships. Looks like they're advance. Guard. Copy that, Bravo. How many?" "Maybe 50 ships. They're bigger than ours." Lisa checked her fuel gauge and weapon systems. Everything was running low. Earth's factories had been destroyed months ago. There were no replacement parts, no new ammunition, no fresh pilots to replace the ones who died every day. All fighters. "This is Admiral Morrison," came a voice over the radio. "The main Zenith fleet has entered our solar system. Time to contact is 4 hours. Return to base and prepare for final operations." Final operations. That was military talk, for we're all going to die, but let's make it count. Lisa turned her fighter toward Earth. The planet looked beautiful from space, blue and white and peaceful. It was hard to believe that in a few hours it might be a dead rock like all the other worlds the Zenith Collective had conquered. Back in the command center, Admiral Jake Morrison studied the tactical display. The enemy fleet was massive beyond belief. Their ships were arranged in perfect formation, moving with the confidence of an army that had never lost a battle. "Sir," Lieutenant Carol Webb said, "we're getting strange readings from the planet's surface." "What kind of readings?" "Energy spikes from multiple locations. The computer says they're coming from historical sites." Jake frowned. "Dr. Parker's project? Must be. But sir, the readings don't match anything in our databases. It's like the planet itself is waking up." On the surface, people in cities around the world stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky. Many of them felt something strange, like a voice calling from far away. Children pointed at the ancient monuments, which were now glowing bright enough to see in daylight. "Mama, why are the stones singing?" A little girl asked her mother, near. Stonehenge. The mother had no answer. She could hear it too, a sound that seemed to come from inside her head rather than her ears. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. In space, the Zenith Collective's flagship received reports from their scouts. The human defense fleet was pathetically small. Victory would be swift and complete. "Begin final approach," ordered the Zenith commander. "Prepare to end this war." But as they moved closer to Earth, their sensors began detecting anomalies. Energy readings that made no sense. Strange patterns in the planet's electromagnetic field. Something was happening down there, something their computers couldn't explain. The commander dismissed the readings as equipment errors. After all, what could a dying species possibly do to threaten the greatest military force in the galaxy? The first phase of humanity's transformation had begun. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Walsh felt his fighter ship break apart around him. The enemy missile had torn through the hull like paper. Air rushed out into space, and his suit alarm screamed warnings about pressure loss and oxygen leaks. He should have been dead in 30 seconds. But something strange happened. The cold of space didn't freeze him. The lack of air didn't make him pass out. Instead, Ryan felt more awake than he had ever been in his life. He could see the battle around him with perfect clarity, even though his helmet display was cracked. And more surprising, he found he could move through space without thrusters. Just by thinking about where he wanted to go, his body began to drift in that direction. Then the drifting became faster. Soon he was moving through the vacuum, like a fish swimming through water. "Control, this is Walsh," he said into his radio, amazed that it still worked. "My ship is destroyed, but I'm alive and mobile." "Don't ask." "Me how?" The voice that came back was confused. "Walsh, your suit telemetry shows you're in hard vacuum with multiple breaches. You should be dead." "Yeah, I should be, but I'm not. And I think I can help with the battle." Ryan looked at the nearest enemy ship and thought about being there. A moment later, he was floating next to its hull. He reached out and touched the metal surface. Somehow, he knew exactly where the ship's weak points were located. Back on Earth, construction worker Danny Reeves was trying to clear debris from a collapsed building when something impossible happened. A 20-ton steel beam had fallen across the entrance, trapping people inside. The rescue team said they needed heavy equipment that wouldn't arrive for hours. Danny looked at the beam and felt angry. People were dying while they waited for machines. Without thinking, he grabbed the steel with both hands and lifted The beam rose into the air as if it weighed nothing. The other workers stared in shock. Danny stared too. He had always been strong, but this was different. This was beyond human strength. "How did you do that?" asked his partner, Mike Santos. "I don't know," Danny said honestly. He set the beam down carefully and flexed his fingers. They felt normal, but he could sense incredible power flowing through his muscles. In a small town in Kansas, elementary school teacher Amy Foster was watching the weather report with concern. A massive tornado was heading straight for the school. The children were in the basement shelter, but the building was old and might not survive a direct hit. Amy walked outside and looked up at the dark clouds. The wind was already strong enough to knock her down, but she stayed on her feet. She raised her hands toward the storm and spoke to it. "Please," she said, "these are just children. Go around us." To her amazement, the tornado began to change direction. The massive funnel cloud turned away from the school and moved across empty farmland instead. Amy stood in the rain, not understanding what had just happened. Dr. Helen Parker ran from one monitoring station to another in her underground lab. Every screen showed impossible readings. The energy coming from the ancient sites was growing stronger by the hour. "Alex, are you seeing this?" She called to her assistant. Dr. Alex Kumar nodded, his face pale with excitement and fear. "The resonance frequency is changing. It's like the sites are talking to each other. And look at these biological readings from the hospitals." Helen sighed, pointing to another screen. "People are healing from injuries that should take weeks to recover from. A man in New York regrew a lost finger overnight. A woman in Tokyo recovered completely from a heart attack." "It's not just physical healing," Alex said. "We're getting reports of enhanced mental abilities, too. A math professor in Boston solved a problem that's puzzled scientists for 50 years. A mechanic in Detroit fixed a broken engine just by looking at it." Helen felt a chill run down her spine. The genetic memory theory. It's actually happening. Across the city, paramedic Kevin Stone was having the strangest day of his career. He had responded to a car accident where 3 people were declared dead on arrival. Their hearts had stopped, and they showed no brain activity. But when Kevin touched the first victim, something incredible happened. Warmth flowed from his hands into the woman's body. Her heart started beating again. Her eyes opened, and she began to breathe. The same thing happened with the other 2 victims. Kevin brought them back from death itself. "How?" asked his partner. Janet Mills, who had seen everything. "I don't know," Kevin said, looking at his hands. "I just knew I could help them. I could feel their life force, and I could make it stronger." Admiral Jake Morrison received reports from all over the Earth fleet. Pilots were performing maneuvers that should have been impossible. Engineers were fixing damaged ships with spare parts that shouldn't have worked. Medical officers were saving lives in ways that defied every rule of medicine. "Sir," Lieutenant Carol Webb said, "the crew of the New Olympus reports that their weapons are firing with 3 times normal power. They don't understand how, but their energy output readings are off the charts." Jake looked at the tactical display. The enemy fleet was still approaching, but something had changed. The human ships were moving differently now, with a coordination that seemed almost telepathic. "Get me Dr. Parker," he said. When Helen's face appeared on the screen, she looked exhausted but excited. "Admiral, we're seeing the activation of dormant genetic sequences in the human population. The ancient sites are acting as amplifiers, awakening abilities that have been locked away for thousands of years." "What kind of abilities?" "The kind that our ancestors wrote about in their myths and legends. Enhanced strength, healing powers, psychic abilities, control over natural forces." "The stories weren't fiction, Admiral. They were memories." Jake felt his world shift. "Are you telling me that humans used to have superpowers?" "Not superpowers. natural abilities that were suppressed for some reason. The sites are removing that suppression. On the bridge of his ship, Captain Joe Martinez watched. His crew worked with newfound efficiency. His navigator seemed to know exactly where enemy ships would appear before the sensors detected them. His weapons officer was hitting targets at impossible ranges. His engineer was keeping the ship running despite damage that should have disabled. Then, not most strange of all, Martinez felt like he could sense the thoughts and feelings of his entire crew. They were becoming something more than individual people. They were becoming a single organism with one purpose. In the medical bay, Dr. Lisa Chun was treating wounded crew members when she realized she didn't need her instruments anymore. She could see inside their bodies with her eyes, spotting injuries and illnesses that shouldn't have been visible. Her hands seemed to know exactly how to heal them. "Doctor," said a wounded pilot, "what's happening to us?" Lisa looked around at her. Patients, all of whom were recovering at an impossible rate. "I think we're becoming what we were always meant to be." The transformation was spreading across humanity like wildfire. Every person on Earth was changing, becoming something greater than they had been. The ancient sites pulsed with increasing energy, sending waves of activation throughout the solar system. In space, the Zenith Collective scouts reported strange behavior from the human fleet. The small ships were moving in impossible formations and displaying weapon capabilities that exceeded their known specifications. The alien commanders dismissed these reports as sensor errors or desperate tactics. They continued their advance. Confident in their overwhelming numbers and superior technology, they had no idea that they were about to face the awakened descendants of gods. The Zenith Collective's main fleet arrived, expecting to find a broken human defense force. Instead, they found something that made no sense. Captain Lisa Hayes sat in her fighter cockpit, but she wasn't really sitting anymore. She had become part of the machine. The ship's systems responded to her thoughts instead of her hands. When she wanted to turn left, the fighter turned before she touched the controls. When she needed more speed, the engines gave her power that shouldn't have been possible. "This is impossible," she whispered, then laughed. "I can see everything." The enemy ships moved in slow motion around her. She could predict where they would be before they got there. Her weapons fired with perfect accuracy, hitting targets that were miles away. Other human pilots were doing the same thing, moving through space like dancers in a deadly ballet. Lieutenant Tony Griffin's voice came over the radio, full of wonder. "Lisa, are you seeing this? My ship is doing things the manual says it can't do." "I know. We're all changing, Tony. The ships are changing too." On Earth, Dr. Matt Stevens and his archaeology team had made camp at Stonehenge. The ancient stone circle was now glowing so brightly that it could be seen from orbit. Matt approached the largest stone and placed his hand on its surface. Images flooded his mind. He saw Earth as it was millions of years ago, when humans were very different from what they became. These ancient humans could travel between stars without ships. They could reshape matter with their thoughts. They could live for thousands of years, but something had hunted them across the galaxy, something that fed on minds like theirs. To survive, the strongest humans had built sanctuaries like Stonehenge. They had locked away their abilities and hidden on Earth, waiting for the day when it would be safe to awaken. "The barriers are coming down," Matt said to his team. "We're remembering what we used to be." The stones spoke to him without words. They showed him a network of similar sites across the galaxy, all connected by invisible lines of force. Earth was just one node in a vast system built by humanity's ancestors. In space, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Walsh had discovered he didn't need a ship at all anymore. He could step from one place to another by folding space around himself. One moment he was near Earth, the next he was beside an enemy battleship light years away. The alien crew inside the ship couldn't see him, but he could walk through their hull as if it were air. He moved to their engine room and simply touched the power core. A massive ship stopped working and drifted helplessly through space. Control, this is Walsh. Enemy battleship disabled, moving to next target. How are you disabling their ships, Walsh? I'm not sure. I just know where to touch them to make them stop working. The USS Marathon, commanded by Captain Joe Martinez, faced an entire enemy battle group alone. By normal military standards, the small human frigate should have been destroyed in seconds. Instead, something remarkable happened. The crew had bonded so completely that they moved as one person. The ship itself seemed alive, responding to their collective will. When they needed more armor, the hull became stronger. When they needed better weapons, their guns fired with the power of battleship cannons. This isn't possible, said the enemy commander, as he watched the small human ship tear through his fleet. Run full scans on that vessel. Sir, the readings don't make sense. It's as if the ship and crew are a single organism. Captain Martinez felt the fear of the enemy crews around him. He could sense their thoughts and emotions as clearly as his own crews. More than that, he could speak to them directly, mind to mind. Surrender, he told them without using his radio. You don't have to die today. Some of the alien ships powered down their weapons. Their crews were too frightened to continue fighting. Something they couldn't understand. Back on Earth, construction worker Danny Reeves had joined a rescue team helping with earthquake damage. But now he was doing much more than lifting heavy objects. He could sense people trapped under collapsed buildings, even when they were buried too deep to hear. There are 3 people under that pile of concrete, he told the rescue chief, pointing to a mound of debris. How can you know that? I can feel them. They're scared but alive. Danny walked to the rubble and began moving stones that weighed several tons each. Within minutes, he had cleared a path to the trapped survivors. Teacher Amy Foster had gathered her students in the school playground. The tornado had missed them, but other storms were forming. Amy realized she could do more than just talk to the weather. She could control it. She raised her hands toward the dark clouds and pushed them apart. Sunlight broke through, warming the frightened children. The storms moved away from populated areas, directed by Amy's will to empty fields where they could do no harm. How are you doing that, Miss Foster? Asked one of her students. I'm not sure, sweetie. I'm just asking the clouds to be nice to us. Dr. Helen Parker watched her monitors in amazement. The energy readings from the ancient sites had stabilized, but at levels that should have been impossible. More importantly, the genetic changes in the human population were accelerating. Alex was seeing new abilities every hour. A firefighter in Chicago can walk through flames without getting burned. A doctor in London can see diseases with their naked eyes. A farmer in Iowa is making crops grow just by touching the soil. Dr. Alex Kumar nodded, overwhelmed by the data. It's like we're becoming a completely different species. But not really different. More like we're becoming what we were always supposed to be. In space, Admiral Jake Morrison watched the battle with growing amazement. His small fleet was not just holding off the Zenith Armada. They were winning. Human ships moved through space in ways that violated physics. Pilots performed maneuvers that should have killed them from the acceleration forces. Weapons fired energy beams that bent around obstacles to hit their targets. Sir, Lieutenant Carol Webb reported, the enemy fleet is breaking formation. Some of their ships are retreating. Retreating? How is that possible? I don't think they understand what they're fighting anymore, sir. The Zenith Collective's command ship received panicked reports from across their fleet. Human vessels were appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Their weapons were being turned against them by some invisible force. Crew members uncaptured. Ships reported seeing humans walk through solid walls. These aren't the same humans we've been fighting, reported a Zenith captain. There's something else now. Something we've never encountered before. The collective's supreme commander studied the battlefield data. His fleet still outnumbered the humans by a massive margin, but numbers didn't seem to matter anymore. The enemy had become something beyond conventional warfare. All ships maintain defensive positions, he ordered. Prepare for full retreat if necessary. On Earth, paramedic Kevin Stone was working with other emergency responders who had developed similar healing abilities. Together, they had saved hundreds of lives that should have been lost. But Kevin was beginning to understand that their powers went beyond just healing. He could sense the life force in everything around him. Plants, animals, even the planet itself pulsed with energy that he could see and touch. The whole world was alive in ways he had never imagined. We're connected to everything, he told his partner Janet Mills. All of life is part of the same system, Janet nodded. She could feel it too. The awakening wasn't just changing individual humans. It was changing their relationship with the entire universe. As the battle continued in space, it became clear that something fundamental had shifted. Humanity was no longer the weak species fighting for survival. They had become something the galaxy had never seen before. The Zenith Collective found themselves facing not just an enemy, but a force of nature that operated by rules they couldn't comprehend. Their certainty began to crumble as they realized they might have made a terrible mistake. The war was far from over, but the balance of power had changed completely. The war had become something beyond what either side expected. Commander Beth Anderson led her boarding party toward the Zenith Command ship, but they didn't use shuttles or airlocks. Instead, they simply walked through the hull as if it were air. The alien crew inside watched in terror as human soldiers appeared from solid walls. Beth could see the fear in their strange eyes, and somehow she understood their language without ever learning it. "We don't want to hurt you," she told the alien captain in his own tongue. "But this war needs to end." The captain's voice shook. When he replied, "How are you speaking our language? How did you get inside our ship?" "I don't know how. I just know that I can." Beth looked around at the bridge crew. "You've been attacking worlds for years, haven't you? Taking what doesn't belong to you. It's what we do. It's what we've always done. Maybe it's time to try something different." The alien captain felt something he had never experienced before. The human woman's presence filled him with a strange calm. Her words carried a weight that went beyond mere sound. Without understanding why, he found himself wanting to listen to her. Back on Earth, entire cities were working together in ways that seemed impossible. In New York, millions of people moved through the streets with perfect coordination, like cells in a living body. Traffic flowed smoothly without signals. Emergency services responded to problems before they were reported. Dr. Kumar stood on a rooftop watching the city below. "Helen, look at this. They're acting like a single organism." Dr. Helen Parker joined him at the window. The sight below was beautiful and strange. People were helping each other without being asked. Construction crews were rebuilding damaged areas at incredible speed. Children played games that would have been considered magic just days before. "The transformation is accelerating," Helen sighed. "We're becoming something new." In space, the ancient sites on Earth pulsed with energy that reached across the solar system. Human ships operating within this field found they could do things that broke every law of physics. Captain Joe Martinez watched his instruments in amazement. The USS Marathon was somehow in 3 different places at the same time. His crew was fighting enemy ships near Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn simultaneously. "How is this possible?" asked his navigation officer, Lieutenant Sam Brooks. "I think we exist in multiple dimensions now," Martinez replied. "Time and space work differently for us." His weapons officer, Sergeant Kate Wilson, looked up from her controls. "Sir, I'm targeting enemy ships that haven't been built yet. My computer shows battles that will happen tomorrow." Martinez nodded. It made sense in a way that couldn't be explained. They were fighting across time as well as space, seeing all possible futures and choosing the ones where humanity survived. Lieutenant, Commander Ryan Walsh had become something like a messenger between dimensions. He could appear anywhere in the battle zone instantly, carrying information and coordinating attacks that spanned light years. "Admiral Morrison," he reported, materializing on the bridge of the flagship. "The enemy fleet is breaking into smaller groups. They're confused and scared." Admiral Jake Morrison had grown used to his officers appearing and disappearing like ghosts. "What's their emotional state, Ryan?" "Fear, mostly. But also curiosity. Some of them want to surrender, but they don't know how. They've never met anyone they couldn't defeat before." On the Zenith command ship, the Supreme Commander held an emergency meeting with his senior officers. The reports they were receiving made no sense. "The humans are everywhere and nowhere," reported his intelligence officer. "Our sensors show them in multiple locations simultaneously. Their ships appear to be made of living metal that repairs itself. One of their fighters destroyed an entire battle group by singing to it," added his weapons specialist. "The crew reported that the human pilot's voice somehow turned our own weapons against us." The commander felt something he had never experienced in decades of conquest: doubt. "What are we fighting?" "Not what, sir. Who? These aren't the same. Humans we've been battling. They've become something else. Something that operates by rules we don't understand." Back on Earth, teacher Amy Foster had discovered that her ability to control weather was just the beginning. She could sense the emotions of every living thing around her. Trees, grass, even insects had feelings that she could understand and influence. Standing in her school's garden, she spoke to the plants. "Grow strong and healthy. The children need you to clean their air and give them shade." The plants responded immediately. Flowers bloomed out of season. Trees grew taller and fuller. The grass became so green and soft that it felt like carpet. Of her students, 8-year-old Tommy Chun watched in wonder. "Miss Foster, are you magic?" "I don't think it's magic, Tommy. I think it's just something humans forgot how to do a long time ago." Construction worker Danny Reeves had joined with other enhanced humans to help rebuild the damaged parts of Earth. But they weren't just fixing buildings anymore. They were improving them. Danny touched a cracked wall and watched as it became stronger than steel while remaining as light as paper. His partner, electrician Rosa Martinez, wired buildings that somehow generated their own power from sunlight and air. "We're not just builders anymore," Danny told his crew. "We're creators." Paramedic Kevin Stone had set up a healing center that drew people from around the world. He and others like him could now cure diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. But more than that, they were making people stronger and healthier than they had ever been before. "I can see the pattern of life itself," Kevin explained to a group of medical students. "Every person has a perfect template inside them. I just help them match that template." A woman who had been paralyzed for years walked out of his center on her own legs. A man born blind could suddenly see colors more vivid than anyone had ever imagined. Children with genetic disorders became healthier than normal humans. In space, the battle reached a turning point when Captain Lisa Hayes made contact with an enemy pilot whose ship had been disabled. Instead of destroying the helpless vessel, she spoke to the alien inside. "Why do you fight us?" she asked, her words somehow crossing the vacuum of space. The alien pilot was shocked to hear a human voice in his mind. "We fight because we are strong. We take what we want." "But why do you want our worlds? What do you gain?" The pilot paused, confused by the question. In all his years of conquest, no one had ever asked him that. I don't know." "It's what we do. It's what we've always done. Maybe there's a better way. Lisa showed him images from her mind. She shared the feeling of creation instead of destruction, of building instead of taking, of growing stronger by helping others instead of conquering them. The alien pilot felt something break inside his heart. For the first time in his life, he questioned everything he had been taught. Across the battlefield, similar conversations were happening. Human forces weren't just defeating their enemies anymore. They were changing them, showing them possibilities they had never imagined. Zenith Collective found themselves facing an enemy that fought with weapons they couldn't understand. Compassion, creativity, hope. These were forces they had no defense against. Some alien ships began powering down their weapons. Their crews wanted to know more about these strange humans who offered friendship instead of slavery, growth instead of conquest. The war was transforming from a battle of destruction into something else entirely. Humanity wasn't trying to defeat the Zenith Collective anymore. They were trying to save them from themselves. But the transformation was far from complete. The final test was yet to come. Dr. Helen Parker stood at the center of Stonehenge as the ancient stones reached their maximum energy output. The air around her shimmered with power that made reality itself seem flexible. Through her enhanced connection to the site, she could sense similar monuments across the galaxy, awakening after millions of years of sleep. "Alex, are you getting these readings?" She called to her assistant. Dr. Alex Kumar stared at his instruments in amazement. "Helen, the signal is reaching other star systems. I'm detecting responses from places we've never even heard of." Helen closed her eyes and let her consciousness expand along the network of ancient sites. What she saw took her breath away. Earth wasn't alone. Scattered across dozens of worlds were other human populations, all sleeping until this moment. The species that the Zenith Collective thought they were destroying had actually been spread across the galaxy for millions of years. "We were never extinct," she whispered. "We were just waiting." In space, Admiral Jake Morrison watched his tactical display fill with new contacts. Ships were appearing from nowhere, emerging from hidden locations throughout Zenith territory. But these weren't ships built in factories. They looked like living creatures made of metal and light. "Sir," Lieutenant Carol Webb reported, her voice filled with wonder, "we're receiving communications from vessels we've never seen before. They're using human call signs, but they say they're from worlds called New Olympus, Asgard Prime, and Avalon Station." Jake felt his understanding of reality shift once again. "Put them through." The main screen lit up with the face of a woman who looked human but somehow more than human. Her eyes held the wisdom of ages, and her presence radiated calm strength. "Admiral Morrison," she said, "I am Commander Diana Prince of the New Olympus Fleet. We received your awakening signal. The long sleep is over. How many of you are there?" Jake asked. "Across 47 star systems, approximately 12 billion human souls have been waiting for this day. The network built by our ancestors has kept us hidden and safe, but now the time for hiding has ended." Captain Lisa Hayes found herself flying alongside ships that defied description. Her fighter had transformed too, becoming something that resembled a great bird made of starlight. The vessel responded not just to her thoughts, but to her emotions, her dreams, her very essence. Around her, the battle had become a dance of impossible beauty. Human ships moved like mythical creatures through space. Dragons made of metal breathed, streams of energy that healed damaged vessels instead of destroying them. Phoenix-like fighters rose from the wreckage of destroyed ships, reborn and stronger than before. "This is incredible," Lieutenant Tony Griffin said over the radio. His own ship had taken the form of a silver eagle with wings that seemed to stretch across light years. "I feel like I'm part of something ancient and powerful." Lisa looked toward the Zenith fleet and saw something that made her heart soar. Many of the alien ships had stopped fighting entirely. Their crews were watching the transformation with awe instead of fear. Commander Beth Anderson stood on the bridge of the Zenith command ship, but she was no longer a prisoner or an invader. The alien crew gathered around her as she shared visions of what their species could become if they chose cooperation over conquest. "Your people have been warriors for so long," she told the alien captain, "that you've forgotten there are other ways to be strong." The captain, whose name was Vextar, listened with growing wonder. "Show us these other ways." Beth smiled and placed her hand on the ship's central computer. Instantly, the vessel systems began to change. Weapons became tools for creation. Engines became generators of life-giving energy. The hull itself became a garden where plants could grow in the vacuum of space. "This is what we offer," Beth said. "Not defeat, but transformation. Not submission, but partnership." Back on Earth, the transformation had reached every corner of the planet. Danny Reeves was working with teams of enhanced humans to rebuild, not just their own world, but to prepare for the arrival of refugees from the war-torn systems. "We're going to need homes for billions of people," Danny told his construction crew as they shaped buildings from raw earth and metal with their bare hands. Not just any homes, beautiful ones, safe ones, places where different species can live together in peace. The buildings they created defied every rule of architecture, structures that seemed to float in the air, powered by the will of their inhabitants. Gardens that grew in impossible spirals, reaching toward the sky like living. Towers, homes that adapted themselves to the needs of whoever lived inside them. Teacher Amy Foster had become something like a planetary coordinator for Earth's weather and ecosystem. She could sense the needs of every living thing on the planet and guide natural forces to provide for them all. Standing in what had once been a desert, she called rain from clear skies and spoke life into barren soil. Within hours, the wasteland bloomed with flowers and trees. Rivers flowed where there had been only sand. Birds that had been extinct for centuries returned as if they had never been gone. "The earth is alive," she told the children who came to see the miracle. "And now that we remember how to listen, it can tell us what it needs." Paramedic Kevin Stone had established healing centers on every continent, but his work now went beyond fixing injuries and diseases. He was helping to evolve the human species itself, unlocking genetic potential that had been dormant for millennia. "Every person has the capacity for these abilities," he explained to crowds of people seeking transformation. "We're not creating something new. We're remembering something very old." The healing centers became places of learning as much as treatment. People discovered they could communicate with animals, grow plants with their thoughts, and sense the emotions of everyone around them. Children born after the awakening displayed abilities that made their parents seem almost primitive by comparison out in space. The final confrontation was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Joe Martinez found himself commanding not just the USS Marathon, but a living constellation of ships that moved as extensions of his will. The vessel had become something between a starship and a force of nature. All Zenith forces, he, broadcast across every frequency. We offer you a choice. Continue this war and face an enemy you cannot comprehend, or join us in building something better than either of our civilizations has ever achieved. The response came not from the Zenith commanders, but from individual crew members throughout. Their fleet, aliens who had spent their lives in service to conquest, began to imagine what they could accomplish through creation instead. One by one, Zenith ships powered down their weapons and requested permission to approach the human vessels. Their crews wanted to see for themselves what these transformed humans could teach them. Admiral Jake Morrison watched the tide of battle turn completely. The Zenith Collective's massive armada was surrendering not out of defeat, but out of curiosity. They wanted to become part of something larger than themselves. "Admiral," came the voice of the Zenith's Supreme Commander, "we formally request an end to hostilities. Our species has much to learn from yours." Jake smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility and hope. "Then let's learn together." Dr. Helen Parker emerged from the Stonehenge complex to find the world completely transformed. The ancient sites no longer pulsed with energy because their work was done. Humanity had remembered its true nature, and the galaxy would never be. The same dot children played in the gardens that had once been battlefields. Former enemies worked side by side to build cities that housed multiple species in harmony. Ships that had come to destroy Earth now served as bridges between worlds, carrying seeds of a new civilization to every corner of space. The war was over, but something far greater had begun. Humanity had returned to its place as guardians of the galaxy, and this time they would not forget who they truly were. The myths had become reality, and reality had become more wonderful than any story ever told. The age of gods walking among mortals had returned, and all creation celebrated their awakening.